questions. Herb Marbury at Vanderbilt, who graduates from ITC, looks at the conflict between the returnees in Ezra and Nehemiah and the returnees from Babylon and the ones, the Amharites, people of the land, and in terms of the conflict between Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois. It says when you understand that conflict, and then you can look at what's happening between the upper class trying to come back. So what this text tries to do is open up the biblical text in different ways, but also to celebrate that we actually have enough black biblical scholars, to in fact cover the whole canon, and also to raise new possibilities for interpretation. The question ultimately comes: will the Academy take us seriously, and will the Church take us seriously?
Well, that's good. That's very good, because it leads me into my next question that you prompted, is that challenging books. Mm-hmm. So, did you have an intended audience in mind, or how would you speak to those that you would like to challenge and say, read this book? Mm-hmm. How would you motivate them to take up the challenge?
They were all together in one place, it comes from a statement in Acts, but we have a question mark with are they all together in one place? Right. It's the intended audience on one hand is the Academy, to get the Academy to see that there are varieties of ways, but also for students in seminaries to be able to cite the work so that if they have alternative questions, can in fact pursue those, and also to try to hopefully to engage the Church, but primarily to look at how does one use this material in teaching the biblical text and biblical methods and biblical ways of interpretation in new ways, right? Because there are new sources. The intended audience for the Africana Bible is more, hopefully, towards the Church, to move beyond accepting ways of reading the text that, in fact, still oppress us, and to open up new vistas and new possibilities, and to and I just read one of the former students yesterday preaching, and he had a text from Mark, but then he went to the gospel according to Phoebe Snow, Donny Hathaway, and Roberta Flack, and the words of "You've Got a Friend," and then went from there to what a friend we have in Jesus, and how does our friendship with Jesus relate to what You've Got a Friend, and so to model, how that can happen, and how we can find newer and richer ways that help us to find God in ways that are more helpful, right, than what many of us have settled for, which is to be in the club and be accepted in the club, and not make waves.
Well, do you think when you're talking about that, looking for new ways of interpretation and allowing for that, do you see these as well as means of empowerment for people to say, hey, look, here's somebody in the academic world, somebody who's learned, making these?
Well, one would hope that that there could be empowerment. I know some of my colleagues, feel that there really is great empowerment that comes from this work. My experience is that a lot of people are still afraid because the forces. Let's face it. Ordination means that you're acceptable. You're not going to be a troublemaker. You're not going to support the institution. And so I think that the hope is that people can be empowered in to look at their own story. We don't have to keep saying you're treating us like Hebrew slaves. We already got slavery in our background. Why are we going to go to somebody else's story? So I think there can be empowerment. And I think there are those who view this as empowerment. There are others though who you still go into black churches and see white Jesuses. Picture of white Jesus is there. And so there are folk who are clear that they don't want to move in those directions.
Right.
But what we're trying to open up is that one can be scholarly and still celebrate race and ethnocentrism, and that can skew the way in which one reads the text, and that's perfectly possible, and to also allow for the students who are coming behind us and for those who are in graduate programs and to have a corpus that they can cite to say, well, you can't look at it this way.
Right.
It is possible to raise these types of questions.
Yeah.
It is possible to. I remember when I took Romans with Leander Keck, and we were translating from Greek, and Paul said, I was baptized in the death of Christ. I said, that kind of sounds like Baptist churches in the South when they started integrating, asking, how long can we keep them underwater? But nobody else in the class laughed. They would say, well, how long? I said, wait a minute. So, our experiences do, in fact, bring new meanings to the text.
Right.
And can then get us to question, find out, as my friend preached yesterday, if you've been in friendship with somebody, it means that sometimes y'all disagree, and you got to struggle, and you don't give up the friendship just because. And so, if you're a friend with Jesus, sometimes you disagree, and you might as well tell Jesus you would disagree with it. And some people will say afterwards, I never thought about it that way, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah. And so these types of ways, I think, can be very liberating and can be helpful.
Yeah.
And what the publications do is give some credence to that it's possible to, in fact, raise these questions.
Okay.
It's possible, in fact, to engage these, and it's and one might even get tenure if one, when people say, well, I can't write this now, I got to wait till I get tenure. By the time you get tenure, you forgot what you were going to write. And so we say, you don't have to wait,
Yeah.
You can go for it.
Let me ask you one more question, and this comes back to they were all together in one place, question mark. And that is that you had mentioned the Asians were uncomfortable talking about race. They'd rather refer to ethnicity. Mm-hmm. Were you at all surprised, or was the group, when they convened, surprised at all that there were still contentions within them, within minority to minority? Was there a sense that there'd be more of a bond of being minority people gathering together, or how did that work out?
On one hand, all of us could tell about experiences in graduate school, in teaching, the way other faculty, relate, to Asian, Black, Latino faculty, and there were some similarities there, but also there were as the introduction talks about, the whole history of the way race gets played out in this country has, in fact, played on getting and maintaining conflict between the groups, but also. So we had to. There were some times when we had to go to the mat and struggle, but it was good to be in a space where that could happen.
Right.
And as it gets played, this has grown into there is a group, a consultation in Society of Biblical Literature that's talking about minoritized criticism. But the program committee kind of slots that group session at the same time that the Asians, the blacks, and Latinos are meeting. So the institutions are clear. They don't want to disturb. I mean, some of us have enough status in the guild that they gotta give us some space, but they'll put us in a space where it's really not going to work. And so there's still you can go to Society of Biblical Literature and American Academy of Religion, and you walk around and you see there's a lot of space that are a lot of rooms that where there aren't many non-white folk there. And the guild hasn't always been willing to make movement, especially because what we're saying is we're not just claiming that this is an African American read or this is an Asian American read. We're saying, given this, these are some different questions to ask about these books. These are different questions, when Lee deals with the whole question of Paul and him being a Hellenistic Jew. What happens to people from the from the colonized group that are trying to get legitimacy with the colonized? And what happens when we read Paul that way?
Right.
And so, especially as post-colonial theory has come into play, why is it that the Gospels have Jesus' major antagonists, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the Romans? Poor Pontius Pilate was forced to crucify